So I did a little bit of writing today. If you guys haven't checked out my Substack, I've been doing it for about a month now. Just a good way to kind of get my ideas out there. You know, the videos are nice, but sometimes you just need a little bit more room to explain what you're talking about. So if you haven't checked out my Substack yet, head over there. It's the same handle as here, Bloody Horns Podcast. But today I talked about the Bulls' future and what can we do to be great again, because this year, man, this year's not fun. There's not a lot to look forward to this year. So all we can do is talk about the future. And I looked at it, I really dived into the tanking thing, and it's crazy when you really crunch the numbers how ineffective tanking and getting top draft picks is. So if you look at the number one pick, there are two number one picks in the last 30 years who have got a championship with the team that drafted them. That's Kyrie Irving and that's Tim Duncan. I know some of you guys are going to say, well, what about LeBron James? I'm not going to count LeBron James. Yes, he eventually got a championship with the Cavaliers, but he left first. He left for Miami, got his titles with the Heat, then came back. So I'm not going to count that because he left. So you got two of them in the last 30 years. And then I think if you take it back 40 years, it's only Hakeem Olajuwon gets added to that list. So the number one pick, not a great track record with the team that drafts him. Number two pick's even worse. Number two pick, you can take it back 40 years, and there's only one guy who has ever led his team to a championship, and that's Isaiah Thomas. Every other number two pick in that time did not lead that team that drafted him to a championship. Number three pick, even worse, man. We got to go all the way back to Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is the only number three pick in the last 40 years to lead the team that drafted him to a championship. A couple years before Mike, Kevin McHale was a number three pick. He'll count because he's with the Celtics, even though it was Bird who gets the primary credit for that. But still, Kevin McHale was probably the second most important piece there. But so if you take it back, man, you take it back 40 years, that's four guys out of the top 40 or out of the top three picks who led the team that drafted them to a championship. That's horrible odds. So what do? You got to look at how teams that have won championships have built their teams. You look at the last couple of champions, the Boston Celtics, they truly built their team through trades. The Tatum and Brown picks came from trades. Kristaps Porzingis came from a trade. Drew Holiday came from a trade. Derek White came from a trade. They were able to highlight talent outside of their team and then go get that talent. They developed some guys in-house who turned out to be pretty nice. Robert Williams was important for their first finals run in 22. Marcus Smart was a fan favorite. They developed those guys, but they shipped them out too. As soon as there was a chance to upgrade, they had no problems doing that. So I think that's a lesson the Bulls can learn is don't be afraid to ship out guys that you have developed. Don't fall in love with guys just because you drafted them, you developed them. If there's a chance to upgrade at the position, do it. The other two, the next team, the Denver Nuggets, they're the hardest team to replicate. Nikola Jokic is a once-in-a-lifetime guy. There's never going to be a time where we see a guy drafted in the 40s who becomes one of the greatest players of all time. It's just not going to happen again. So they're a hard team to replicate, but still, they looked at a guy like Aaron Gordon. If you remember Aaron Gordon in his Magic days, if you're old enough to remember early Aaron Gordon, he was being billed as a Blake Griffin type player coming out of college. They were trying to get him to be a three when he first showed up there, trying to get the ball in his hands more, get him to do more. They wanted him to be a future all-star. That's not him. That's not his game. The Nuggets were able to realize that, target him. They didn't give up very much when they traded for him, and then they put him into the perfect role next to Nikola Jokic. They were able to get KCP without giving up any draft capital. They drafted very smart over the years. With the Michael Porter Jr. pick, they realized, hey, we can take some time here. We can let this guy get healthy, and then he might be exactly what we need. Jamal Murray, they drafted him. They let him develop. Guys who didn't work out, like Emmanuel Mudiay, they got rid of him right away. They didn't try to force it, especially once Jamal Murray came in there. They were like, we really don't need Mudiay anymore. So even though they had failed lottery picks in that time, it didn't matter because they didn't hold on to him too long. They didn't try to force them to keep being what they wanted. They could have done what the Bulls did with Patrick Williams and extended Mudiay and kept trying to force the fit. They didn't do it. They moved on. They cut bait fast. Christian Braun, great example of taking a guy who comes out of college. He came from Kansas. You knew he was going to be ready to play. Taking that guy, the known quantity, over taking an upside guy like the Bulls took with Dalen Terry, where everything was theoretical with him. So that's the lesson you could take from the Nuggets is try to take advantage of the bad teams. And then if it's not working, cut bait as quick as you can. The Golden State Warriors, they're an interesting one. The year before the Nuggets won the championship, the Warriors obviously won. They're interesting because tanking didn't work for them. They tanked for 3 straight years. When KD left, when Clay went down with his injury, the Warriors just tanked. They sat Steph for a bunch of games. They sat Draymond for a bunch of games. And they came out of that tank with James Wiseman, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga has developed into a nice piece, but it's taken him some time. James Wiseman, I think he's in the league somewhere. He ruptured his Achilles earlier this year, and he's been traded like 2 or 3 times since as a contract. Moses Moody isn't even a rotation piece for them. So their tanking did not work. Their championship, it's kind of a once in a million championship that they won because it was like the last hurrah for Steph, Clay, Draymond, and then they were able to get their guys they got on the fringe, guys at the end of the first round, Jordan Poole, Kevon Looney, they played big roles. Some fringe free agent signings like Otto Porter Jr., Gary Payton, they played big roles. And then Andrew Wiggins, he's a guy, they took a flyer on him. They were able to salvage a little bit of value out of KD leaving by bringing in D'Lo, but they looked at D'Lo right away within like a month, and they were like, this shit ain't going to work. So they got rid of him before the rest of the league caught on, and they were able to kind of take advantage of the Timberwolves, another bad front office at the time at least. Now they're a pretty solid one. At that time, they were a disaster. So they took advantage of the Timberwolves, took advantage of their desperation. Not only were they able to flip D'Lo for Andrew Wiggins, which straight up, 5 years later, that looks like a great deal. They got a draft pick out of it. So they realized the fit wasn't there. They moved on right away, and they took a flyer on a guy who it wasn't working for him in his current situation, but they thought they could plug him in and get more out of him. The Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso trade kind of reminds me of that a little bit in the sense that they were able to salvage some value out of Alex Caruso. Not the value they should have. They should have traded him 6 months earlier and got a lot more, but they salvaged something out of him. But once we got Giddey in-house, it's pretty evident that he doesn't fit. They should have moved on from him while the value was still up there. Instead, they're trying to make him fit in, and it's just hamstringing his value. He has little to no trade value now. He's going to be a free agent this offseason. Hopefully we can bring him back on the qualifying offer, but it shows how different organizations run and how the successful ones run versus the non-successful ones. And then we got the last championship that I'm going to go over, the Bucks. The Bucks are kind of a team that the Bulls, honestly, they could learn a lot from just with Giannis. With Giannis, if Jokic is the greatest pick of all time, Giannis is the second greatest draft pick of all time. That value at number 15, they didn't know what they were getting. And now, I feel like we kind of misremember what early Giannis was like. What early Giannis was like is nobody really knew what he was. And the Bucks, they had no idea what they had either. But what they knew was that he had a special motor and he was super competitive and he tried his ass off. So they thought they could build that around him. And the way that they did it, because he was so raw, they didn't force him into any roles. They played him in a bunch of different roles. He played point guard for a season. He played shooting guard for a season. He played the wing. He played the 3 spot for 2 or 3 seasons. And then once he bulked up, they told him, you're a 4 now, and they gave him the keys. Don't forget, there was a period of time where he was playing Robin to Jabari Parker's Batman. So he played all sorts of roles his first 6 years. They didn't become a contender until his 6th year. His 6th year was his second All-Star year. It was the year they won 60 games. Prior to that, they had won 42 games. So it took time. They let him develop over time, and the Bulls should do that with Modest Buzelis. I'm not saying Modest Buzelis can become Giannis Antetokounmpo. That'd be crazy. Giannis is one of the greatest players of all time. But they have similarities. So Modest, he has the same kind of motor. That's his number one skill right now, is he has a motor. He goes out, he gets it. He doesn't back down to anybody. He shows no fear. He has athleticism, and we don't really know what his position is going to be in the NBA. Yeah, he's as tall as a 4, but he's not strong right now. So I'd like to see the Bulls use that for his development. Get him on ball more. See what kind of creator he is off the dribble, what kind of creator he is for others. Play him at the wings. When he gets bigger, play him at the 3, play him at the 4, maybe even some small ball 5. But don't try to fit him into a role. Let the role develop organically the same way it happened with Giannis. So we got time with Modest. He's only 20 years old. It's only his first year in the league. We don't need to rush anything with him. So if you guys haven't checked out my Substack, go check it out. I kind of broke down some of it here, but I go a lot more in depth on it over there. The Bulls' future, it's really, really frustrating right now. It's just a frustrating year. There's not a lot of hope on the horizon. That's the difference between this year and previous hopeless Bulls years, is there was still something we could cling to a little bit. Not really much right now. So you guys let me know in the comments what you think. And like I said, go check that Substack out.